We are here today with Joe Brady, who was on a recent bike tour through Tuscany. We were just chit-chatting a little bit about that, and we're diving right in. We can't wait to talk to Joe. So much is happening in the world of Flex. Instant, Joe is the CEO for the Americas of the Instant Group, so he is right in the middle of it. The Instant Group had some exciting news recently, so we're going to dive into what's happening in the world of Flex from Joe's perspective. Joe, thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Thank you, Jamie and Gio. Great to be here.
It was so formal. I don't even know what to do right now.
I know. I wanted to dive right in. There has to be an intro. So, yeah. Gio, back
to you're extra special, Joe. We don't always have this must have an intro.
We totally do.
It just kind of happens. So I would love, why don't we start with your background, Joe? I mean, we know it, but I think it's important for people to know your corporate background. And then from there, if you would share a little bit, kind of the different line items of that fall under Instant, right? You've got some new branding and some new stuff going on. So let's start there.
Sure. Just as far as background, I've been with Instant for 2.5 years, almost 3. I joined December of 19, so it's been
perfect timing,
right? It's been a pandemic, and most of my career I've been more focused on retail real estate and the retail side of things. It's interesting because before joining Instant, I was at Walgreens. I was the head of real estate for Walgreens, which is one of the biggest retailers, and we had a portfolio of over 9,000 stores, 150 million square feet. And, it was the antithesis of flexibility, right? It was an ocean liner, really difficult to turn. And, I thought this idea of agility and flexibility was sort of on trend before the pandemic when I joined Instant. And it was very clear to me that once the pandemic kicked in, that it was on target. Like we were lamenting the fact in May of 2020 that, we had to let some people go and we had to pull in our lines, and it was the, can't curse, but it was the, oh no moment, right? And the degree of uncertainty was so high, and yet I felt like Instant and it was built for this time. And that is, the notion of connecting people with a smarter working world, right? Like that whole thing started building out of it. In terms of background, before Walgreens, I was at JLL for 9 years. And prior to that, I had my own consulting firm that I sold to JLL in 2008. So,
that was a company in 2008. That must have been, or was it right before?
It was January 3rd,
okay.
2008.
Okay.
It was a really good time for a small consulting firm to find a safe port in a storm, and JLL provided that, and it was a good run. So I ran the retail practice there for a number of years and got into leading the banking industry as well. So, I saw an awful lot around the office asset class as well as the retail asset class. But, if you think back then, even, from 2007, 8, 9, you started hearing an awful lot about the office is dead, right? Retail is dead. Brick and mortar, not office is dead, but brick and mortar and retail.
I was going to say, I think the office hadn't died quite yet.
Yeah.
But retail was starting to die. Yeah.
I was projecting the clickbait ahead of time. But yeah, I mean, you heard the same silliness, right? The same prognostications of the same smart people who are always wrong, which, you don't bet on human behavior, against human behavior. You don't bet against that. I mean, you have to embrace it. And that's exactly what happened in retail. So the consumer just took hold, didn't they? I mean, the power went from property to people. Gio, like we talked about when we were together at GWA in New York, and you were seeing much of the same thing in office, and be happy to get into that in a bit. But Gio, you also asked about the different lines, and there was some news. So in March, we had an event that was a recapitalization. So our previous private equity firm called Bowmark have been with us and we've been with them for three and a half years. We had a great run, but it was very clear that our ambitions outstripped what Bowmark was able to do. Tim Rodber, our global CEO, wound up speaking with Mark Dixon, who was looking at his business and saying, we are not getting credit for an awful lot of these technology assets that we have. And so what emerged was an interesting structure whereby IWG became our institutional investor. And there were some 5-6 assets that moved over from IWG to Instant for us to drive. So brands like Easy Offices, Coworker, DaVinci, and within DaVinci, there's DaVinci meeting rooms and DaVinci virtual offices. A number of others as well, but really those are the key areas that we've been focused on. So with Coworker, there's access to some 27,000 locations globally. And the work that Coco Quillen and the team at DaVinci's doing is really extraordinary around the VO business, virtual office business, as well as meeting rooms. So in addition to those great brands that have joined our constellation of brands, we're thinking through and we will be rebranding probably before the end of the year, and we're working through that process now, which is always fun, as you can imagine. But
a lot of work and distracting.
No, but it is fun. It is. Okay. I mean, it's and then putting all the pieces together, just thinking about it. What does the consumer need, right? And the consumer is the employee, and how we're thinking about it. And then how can we advise and engage with corporates such that their folks can navigate hybrid work? What does that mean? You spent a lot of time on the podcast talking about that, but I mean, it's vitally important. So as you think about Gio, just addressing your point, Instant at this point is able to go from the very simple to the very complex, from a VO to an outsourced managed turnkey office. And we just delivered 50,000 square feet for GSK in Philadelphia and another 70,000 square feet in Durham, North Carolina for their split US headquarters. And, just exciting work. We built Netflix's office in Buenos Aires. We're doing a whole host of work with Amazon, American Express, and so forth. So those get really, really complex. And then in addition, we have Incendium, which is our global consulting firm that really focuses on everything from executive search to RFP, target operating model, sustainability, and then strategy and change. So, we're looking at how to weave all of these items, particularly sustainability, throughout everything we do.
Yeah. So I love the way that y'all have continued shifting with times, right? And that's what it takes, is to be able to see what's ahead and be able to steer that, especially as a big ship, if you will. It becomes more difficult, right? You can't pivot and turn on a dime like when you were doing your own consulting, right? Obviously JLL was difficult to do that as well. Walgreens was probably difficult, but not as difficult because you had one brand, and by that point you were running things over there to a certain extent. But I mean, I think that's the beauty, that you guys keep bringing in talent, right? I mean, I think Nick, who you brought in for the consulting side, has got an incredible background and been able to hit the ground running real fast. The team that you've got running Instant and their ability to go out and build relationships with who you have is huge. How do you see your continued relationship with IWG playing out? I mean, obviously respond to what you can or what you can't, but I mean, I've heard out there that it's an 18-month agreement. It's gonna be spun off and then put back out. I've heard that Wayne, who is the US CEO, has actually compared it to like ClassPass, or, obviously we've got Sam and the team doing Desk Pass. So kind of what can you talk about that when it comes to that?
Yeah, it was Mark Dixon and IWG acknowledged publicly that the intent was to invest, put those brands in a safe pair of hands, and get some synergies, the old business buzzword, and then roll it out, whether it's a public entity and offering in 12 to 18 months, or another refi with a larger private equity firm. So absolutely, there's a short-term nature within the deal as structured. So and that's not that's not inside scoop. That's publicly available information. And what we've been able to do is tap into and have access to 3,500 odd locations that are within IWG that haven't always been available to everyone else. At the end of the day, we are looking at our corporate occupier clients and saying, we give you knowledge of the market, we give you transparency and choice. Ultimately, that's key, because that's what the consumer wants. This is a strange market. It is massively opaque, isn't it? I mean, you can't look around and say, okay, give me comps for Boston or Bangalore, Bogota, because there's no LoopNet or there's no CoStar. And that's where Instant serves a really important role for our corporate clients. Given the flow of demand and the amount of supply on our network right now, we become the proxy for the market in many ways. So we're able to advise, we're able to mark to market portfolios, and so Gio, you were talking about our people, and Nick Lavigny's doing just a terrific job leading Incendium in the U.S. We recently hired Emily Watkins, and I don't know if you know Emily, but she's just terrific. She's a old friend of mine from JLL, and we've worked together. I've worked for her. We've engaged throughout our careers here recently, and I knew that she would be absolutely the right person for our chief client officer in the Americas. So she's responsible now for all sales, all account management, everything having to do with our clients. And so she's about a little over 30 days into it. So I guess in instant terms, she's been here for 2 years. More than dog years. No, but she's doing a terrific job. And part of it is to really understand what the client journey is. We have so many clients that come into us that buy, that lease a serviced office, and that might be it. And that's all they want. But others are looking for other services. So she's going to oversee all of that. And the other really cool thing, we brought on Craig Hughes in London, and Craig was formerly the head of real estate for PwC, and he's now the CEO of partnerships. So Craig's job is to really turbocharge the supply side. And so we're taking a very aggressive and ambitious look at what that supply side could mean. So clearly operators, which we'll continue to focus on, but think about corporates and gray space, which has always been kicked around, and think about alternative locations that are used for work but aren't easily accessible. What if you were able to access every hotel meeting room, or airport or transportation nodes, or university locations, or a whole host of others? I mean, I have a friend that runs a multifamily REIT, and he's bound and determined to ensure that part of their amenity package is flexible working and conference rooms. So why not add those to the mix? So right now we're at about 250 million square feet in terms of supply. with a goal to get to 1 billion square feet very quickly.
Yeah.
Joe, wait, my turn.
Yeah.
This is when we get a good guess, we have lots of questions. We have to fight over who gets to ask the next question. So Joe, I'm curious with the roll up, if you were kind of thinking ahead about, write a case study in a couple of years about, you mentioned synergies. What are the synergies? What are the benefits? Maybe both for the end user, and then, maybe folks that are part of your, the supply, out of this project. What does that look like in a couple of years? How does it shift the industry?
Yeah, I mean, iPhone, right? I mean, it's sort of it's that piece of glass. It's about friction, reducing friction. It's not about fuel, right? It's not bells, whistles, features, benefits. Who cares? We as consumers want a frictionless experience, and so where we're going in accessing flexible and agile real estate is where Amazon went with a one-click purchase. You don't have to put your credit card in, right? You can just look, boom, I got it, ship it to my home. You know where I live, shows up tomorrow. That's why there's packages at the door just stacked up, because stuff keeps coming. I mean, this is a really clunky industry, isn't it? I mean, it's still highly manual. It's difficult to scale, and I do think that as we emerge this fall, back to school, should be interesting. We thought we were sort of out of it, and now we have interest rates, inflation, recession, a whole host of other things that are happening that are impacting return to office and work and all that. But we're always going to have shocks to the economy, whether they're geopolitical or economic or whatever. But point is, I think we're getting to the next normal in a more meaningful way, and we're feeling the traditional summer slump. At least we did, but then demand now is looking stronger and stronger. So I just think it'll be interesting to see how people react. And by people, I mean the consumers, the workers, right? Not everybody. I know, Gio, you want to move to Bali and be a nomad, but not everyone can do that. But we have to get to whatever that next normal is. And so it's going to be a debate about the definition of hybrid. And many people tend to default to sort of a binary view of that, which is you're at home or you're at work. We tend to think about it not in a binary or digital aspect, but more quantum, right? So this is the quantum physics part of the show, where we talk about Schrodinger's work, where, is the cat alive or dead? Well, is the cat working in a Starbucks or in an office somewhere, or, in a WeWork? And the answer is yes, right? I mean, because during the same day, we might work in 3 or 4 different places.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. And so what is the ecosystem that is available to that employee? And how, so Jamie, you're saying, okay, I don't have a very good crystal ball, but what I do know as a consumer, that if I fly to Denver and I need to, meet with you two, Jamie and Gio, that I want to be able to get on my app and just say, I want to get on my Instant app and say, this is, where I want to meet. By the way, send cars. Here's the food. Make the AV work, right? Frictionless. And oh, by the way, it gets billed to Tim Rodber, or like the consumer doesn't want to put a credit card in. That's just right. It's just clumsy and it's clunky, and it's not how we as consumers spend our money. We spend our money now, and we engage in retail in a very frictionless fashion. And when we make our money, it has way too much friction in it. So I think that, the folks that are going to win are those that can do away, eliminate, minimize friction.
I'm afraid to go because he's going to yell at me.
Yeah.
I know. Wait, I had one.
You
What?
had-
I did have a quick
follow-up?
follow-up question. When you talk about the GSK project you mentioned, I think I saw something about one of your projects on LinkedIn, and I didn't know that was part of what you offer. Is that more like a workplace strategy, sort of workplace fulfillment? Does it include flex, or what does that type of project look like?
That project is a full managed outsourcing to the
Okay.
point where Instant will take the head lease, we'll
Okay.
engineer the CapEx. We'll put money in, or the client puts money in. It just depends on how they want to work the levers between CapEx and OpEx. We are responsible for design and the build out, and then we operate the space throughout the tenancy. I like to say our managed delivery it makes securing your own branded office space as easy as leasing a car. Little longer cycle time, but you decide that you want a BMW, you want an X5, you want it silver, you want to drive it for 3 or 4 years, whatever that number is. By the way, you don't want to pay for any maintenance, and you want one certain price per month. That is the structure that we're able to deliver for our clients. So in doing so, we're able to deliver it generally. If it's a built out space, not core and shell, generally you're delivering between 6 and 9 months. Corporates generally deliver between 12 and 18 months. We're able to parallel path an awful number of items, which helps speed up the delivery and that cycle time. And we take a lot of headaches away. We provide that certainty of payment. So, and the other really important thing is we work with our clients and sign an intent to lease such that that whole build out period is on us. Their lease doesn't start until they occupy day one. So oftentimes, right, if you're following proper accounting rules, once you sign the lease,
Yeah.
the clock starts ticking. So there's some savings up front. There's a whole element of sustainability that we wrap in. There's a whole digital and data and dashboard experience that we add in as well. And so it becomes a really interesting tool. We've built over 5 million square feet globally.
Yeah. I don't know. Right. I wasn't, it's interesting and interesting in this kind of point in time, because you have this macro view. I mean, there are other folks who do similar, things, but you mentioned the data, right? And you can see human behavior and what types of spaces people are using. So I would guess that enables you to, like, as best as we can at this point, right? Like we talked about human behavior, hard to predict. Because you said 50,000 feet. That's a lot of physical space.
Well, that's their split U.S. headquarters.
Okay.
So I would say on average we're doing 10 to 15,000 square feet.
Okay.
We've done as large as 300,000 square feet in Manila.
Yeah.
But it just depends. I mean, the point is it's about choice and transparency. So when we're going into a market, we're in Philadelphia, we're looking at the market for a client. It's very easy to identify what a traditional lease would cost and a self-delivery. And then we're able to overlay what would an operator, a flexible office look like and cost for you, and then compare it with the total cost of occupancy from an instant managed delivery. And so we do go and do all the math and run the numbers and have the TCOs, the total cost of occupancy, such that the clients can make their informed decisions. Because you think about it, and I was a corporate real estate person, and I'm not going to offend anyone here. It is uncensored, so I have to get a little edgy, right? I mean, at the end of the day, corporate real estate folks can only say no. They don't have the ability to say yes at all. Everything has to go up to either a real estate committee or the C-suite, or other people are approving to say yes. And so, I mean, it's vitally important for us, particularly as an industry, to know how to package that decision logic and to think about, what the value proposition is, so that it plays with the chief people officer and the CFO and the CEO. And that's kind of our mindset as we go into these things. If I was a principal and if I was making this decision, what information would I need to make it?
I think what I love, so number one, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. So this isn't something new, right? I mean, obviously in the last 5 years, we've seen, I guess, Industrious has jumped in with their Canvas product and tried doing some of this. We know that WeWork was trying to do it with their WeWork HQ or whatever. You guys have been doing this. You guys have been doing this for quite a while, right? I mean, this isn't something new. So I think that's important for people to understand. I mean, this isn't, hey, we're catching up with times. I mean, you were really one of the first movers. And a big part of it, I want to say, is the data that you have. In my opinion, you have more data on the flex side of the business than anyone in the globe, just because you've been doing it as long as you have been. And in my opinion, I think you're finally taking advantage of that by partnerships, by bringing in the right team. And obviously you're a big part of that over the last few years, because there is no reason why you shouldn't control a deal from cradle to grave, right? Rather than handing it off like it's been done in the past. So, that goes back to the data side. I mean, I think James has one of the most robust. So James is your head of research, as you well know, but so other people know, but
James Rankin.
He's incredibly knowledgeable, knows the industry super well. I mean, right now, in my opinion, we're in a race to data, right? To me, that's what your agreement with IWG was. How do we take our data, their data, everything in between, and bring it together? And that's what we don't have. Like my call before this podcast was with a potential VentureX franchisee who's a hotel operator. And he's going, Giovanni, I can tell you off of RevPAR how a hotel's market is performing, right? So they can adjust, shift, and change based off of that. We don't have that in our industry, right? We don't have that transparency. We don't have that line of sight. And so, yes, people like me can go out and shop and make calls to people we know, but there isn't a book to buy. When I say a book, a data research that comes out monthly or quarterly or whatever. You guys have that in-house, right? You guys have access to that yourself that very few people have.
You just have to call me. I'm here.
Well, you be careful, because
I know. I was like, uh-oh.
I mean, last time I called y'all, she sent me a bill for $2,500. I'm calling the wrong person.
I'm not saying it's free, but
but yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of it. And that's what the goal is, so that people can tap into that. I mean, we were at Juicy together. You were at the GWA conference with us in New York, the immersive, and then hope to see you here in Frisco for the one that's coming up in the fall. But that's the reality is Regis's competitors, the smaller mom and pops, the regional groups, have all been freaking out of, oh my gosh, now Regis is going to have all our data. Do we still put our information on instant?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is no, there's no pipe. There's no facility with which any of the other data that we have can go anywhere close to IWG, period.
Yeah, and I think that's important.
Gio, if we did that, we'd be done. I mean, the only thing that we have a 22-year history of trust in this industry and a reputation. I can tell you that Tim Rodber, from the top on down, there is nothing, no one, or no amount that would jeopardize that, period.
Yeah.
We're not going to go play for live golf or anything. Like there's no price. I mean,
and I think that's part of the conversations I had with them was exactly that, right? But I'll tell you, right after it happened, I mean, there was people trying to create groupings of calls and, how do we revolt? How do we take people off? How do we get people to join us? And it was so interesting just to see, I mean, how that scarcity, fear-based mentality gets spread so fast, right? When it's ultimately, we're trying to get to a place where what I love about this industry is that we compete and we collaborate, right? That's a big part. Is we all know competitors that are going, hey, you know what, this is not the right fit for us, but they are for you. Why don't you talk to them? And obviously we have the IWGs of the world that have multiple brands, right? They can go, hey, you're not right for Regis, but you're right for Spaces or Signature or whatever the brand is. And so I think that's a big part that people, I think that's where we're in a learning curve / growing pains of people understanding this is to better the industry. It's not to hinder the industry.
It's so a couple of things. One, disruption is messy, and change is uncomfortable. And this is arguably the largest industry, call it the office asset class at $3 trillion. It's one of the biggest asset classes in industries that's yet to be disrupted. And it's happening right now. So there's going to be a lot of gnashing of teeth and, nervous people. And then as it relates to IWG Instant, for multiple years prior, Instant was always either number one or number two for IWG in terms of deal flow. We're the biggest aggregator. They're the largest operator. And so, that stands to reason. So it's not like, and that probably hasn't changed an awful lot. But then think about the industry, though. I mean, show me another industry that has, and I think John Arenas corrected me on this, and I'd be interested to dive deeper. But I mean, there's probably about 6,000 operators, and he brought it back to 600. So whether you drop a zero or not is probably, I'm indifferent, because you still have the number one competitor that's at 3,500. Number two is at 800. Number three is at 250.
Yeah,
150, 200. And then it becomes this asymptote that goes on forever of just, right? I mean, so I look at that industry and I look at our industry and I say, well, it's massively ripe for consolidation. And by the way, right now IWG 10 is the largest player, but they're not for everyone. And there's a reason why there's segmentation in other industries, like in retail or in hoteling. Like, I know you like to use the hotel, Gio, the hotel example of an industry. And I think that's super accurate as well. There's a place for everybody. I think at the end of the day, as we continue working with clients, as we continue to see this demand profile come in through our digital channel that then goes out into the marketplace, we're going to keep that level of trust. I can assure you from my perspective, and likewise from Tim's perspective.
Well,
so
wait,
Bonvoy
for a second.
Bonvoy. I was going to say, so on our last podcast, Jamie said every time Giovanni used the word Bonvoy, we're going to start a drinking game that you have to drink. And so I texted her right now and said, I haven't used the word Bonvoy today. She said, my margarita's ready.
Bonvoy. Yeah, I've got my Bonvoy right here.
Right. See, exactly.
Yeah.
Giovanni mentions it at least once an episode.
Yes.
Joe, I was just thinking, I always go back to incentives, right? Like, humans operate based on incentives. And if your goal is, frictionless access, then IWG is not for everyone, nor is it everywhere. So when you talk about sort of the future in, the app, you need, not everybody, but you need a lot of supply in order to fulfill choice. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's clear that you're not incented to do the wrong thing here if your goal is to serve the end consumer.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, if you think about, Instant's blueprint, which we minted right January of 2020, which was really good timing, was this idea that we exist. What's our why? What's the Simon Sinek why? And we exist to free businesses to move forward faster. So that's either the occupier clients, or it could also mean our operator partners. It can mean landlords, it can mean investors, it can mean an awful lot of things. And so, ultimately what you'll see is that if we're not able to support the supply side as well as we do the demand side, then the equation falls down.
Exactly.
And so, we know that even the 30,000 odd serviced offices that are in the world aren't a big enough supply to satisfy the requirements and demands that the consumer or the employees are going to have. So how do we open up? I mean, we're starting to think about this idea of, through Craig Hughes, what is that potential universe? Could it be 2 billion square feet? Could you have, and the thing that I'm really intrigued with, because I've spent a lot of time on the corporate side, is this idea that, whether it's Yelp that's been in the news recently, they closed New York, Chicago, and Washington, DC. I mean, that's almost 500,000 square feet back on the market. How's that going to get absorbed and how quickly? Or conversely, how do we exploit that? And, how do you get to a win-win with a corporate like that? And again, that's just one of hundreds and hundreds of companies that's looking at downsizing. Salesforce just put something like 400,000 square feet of Salesforce Tower, San Francisco, on the sublease market. Again, where's the absorption going to come from? And I just think we have to get really creative as an industry, and there's going to be wonderful opportunities for operators to come in and exploit. I mean that in the best sense of the word, but to exploit that space to meet this increased demand. And again, I don't think the consumer or the employee, or particularly the corporates, have a firm footing. No one knows what's really happening, right? And the only thing we know is that in the next 10 years, we are going to experience more change than we did in the previous 100.
Mm-hmm.
So are you going to go out?
Buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up. The Economist does a January edition every year, and they prognosticate about the trends for that year. In January of 2020, now mind you, that edition was probably written in December, but in January of 2020, nowhere in their prognostication was the word COVID-19 or that contraction or whatever it is, right? And then likewise, in this year, there was nothing about Ukraine. So we have all of these exogenous, I'll use a fancy word, these exogenous variables that are just flying
We're going to
in.
start a different drinking game, Gio, with Joe.
Yes. Bonvoy. All right. So, the point is, how the heck do you sign a 10-year lease? If it's not core. Now, if you're Jamie Dimon and you're building 270 Park Avenue for 14,000 people, because it's your global headquarters and you're arguably one of the largest banks in the world, if not the, then sure, that makes sense. But, think about the tail of the portfolio, which is where we spend most of our time.
See, this is where we get awkward, because I'm like, come on, Jamie, because then
you want me to ask the next question?
Yeah.
I'm curious. I have to figure out if I can ask this the right way. But Joe, since we were, Gio, the three of us, if you were going to give advice to traditional brokerages about sort of the role that they'll play, you're playing a pretty broad role. What do you think the role of the traditional broker will be in the next 10 years? 5 years? Who can
I have friends in all the firms, and spent 9 years at JLL. There's I guess we're uncensored, aren't we? So, if you think about it, think about those companies. There's two key parts to each of those brokerage companies, commercial real estate companies. You have your markets brokers, then you have your corporate solutions, your advisors. And in both instances, those companies were built off a 10-year lease, weren't they? At least a 10-year lease.
Mhm.
So the brokers are, are jumping out of bed and doing just wonderful work and doing 10-year leases. And then when you see a six month, 20-seat assignment, it's just, it's not how apex predators work, right? Like, they want to go after the big thing. And then likewise, I guess on the corporate solutions side, thinking about big portfolios and big contracts for facilities management, things like that, everything else sort of hangs off those key those two areas. So, I don't want to give a whole lot of advice to them because, I feel like there's a place for all of us to play. But I think many have found it very difficult to pivot and to really drive meaningful outcomes for their clients, particularly on the occupier side. On the investor side, where I think these brokerage firms have a lot of influence, they're doing property management, they're doing agency leasing, there's capital markets activity. I think there's a really, it's almost like there's this opportunity for us to get to the RevPAR equivalent for flexible office space. And as we think about a building stack, what does the flexible component mean? And I think the going in thesis is, man, this is gonna be terrible because we can't, how are we gonna value this? And what's it gonna do to the impact and so forth? How do we finance this? But Marriott hotels go to zero occupancy every day, right? But through RevPAR, there's a proxy. So I don't know. I mean, I think, acknowledging that there's a tail in the portfolio, acknowledging that there's a need and there's an interesting place for agility. I tend to use the word agility more than flexibility, because agility is the ability to move quickly and easily, which is antithetical to corporate real estate, traditional corporate real estate. So how do you, but I think most landlords know they have to move quickly and easily, and they have to reduce that friction. I'll go back to that adage there that in order to get people in order to get an operator to come in and operate space so that more consumers can come in, you've got to eliminate the friction. It'll be made a lot easier if the larger industry adopts the fact that flexibility is part of the building stack. And
so I'm going to take it even more micro than that. Obviously, you mentioned some European and Asian transactions, right? And so taking it more micro, do you feel like other parts of the world, call it Europe, Asia, are further ahead than the US when it comes to making the shift overall in real estate, right? Not just from a corporate real estate standpoint, but even from a service standpoint, from a real estate service provider standpoint, it seems like there's a different offering. I mean, what's your experience there? Do you have some that you want to share about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Our company, Instant, is the Instant Group is based in London. We were founded there, and so whether it's flexible office space or whether it's sustainability, ESG, LEED certification, I would say that Europe, the UK and Europe have always been ahead of the US. I think Asia Pac, I'm not, as schooled in kind of the history, the corporate real estate history there, but the experiences are that they tend to follow a bit of the EMEA approach, UK and Europe in particular. But you think about some of the most interesting, fully sustainable buildings that are out there, right? I mean, you tend to see things in the Netherlands and in the Nordics, and then I remember in when I was at Walgreens and we were doing Boots deals in London. Walgreens Boots Alliance is the global company. Boots is the cousin over in the UK and elsewhere. But there were riders in the landlord work agreements around sustainability, and we still don't have those at a meaningful level in the U.S. And then in terms of flexibility, far and away, London feels to me like the epicenter where an awful lot of it has happened. It's been where instance growth really emerged. It's our most mature market, and interestingly enough, the very first managed deal we did was with a public entity, right? It was called Transport for London. So they run the tube system. And so if you think about these overly bureaucratic organizations, how do you go about leasing temporary space if you're building a tube line, or if you're rebuilding a station or whatever? And so Transport for London, TfL, came to us and said, hey, we just need this office. Can you build it out for us? And then, easy peasy, and we're done in 2 years, and then we move on. So really, I mean, out of necessity. It wasn't like someone had this great Stanford Business School case study and a business plan and said, we're going to do this. It was a bit necessity being the mother of invention. So I think there was more of the willingness to, quote, outsource and engage. I think in the US in particular, there's a mindset that I can build out Boston. There's no problem. Like I'll just, I know people, and we'll go do that. But then when the demand is Bogota, it's a different story, isn't it? So they're looking for help. So I would say in some instances, the familiarity, the experience, and the track records that corporates have in the US are contributing to the inertia of maybe not getting as flexible as they need to be as quickly as they do.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, to me, it's amazing to see the shifts and the trends, right? Even, on the brokerage side, we refer to it as the European plan, where in Europe, a lot of service providers actually pay a salary and then a bonus, not a commission-based type of payment, right? And so you alluded to that kind of earlier of the, just kind of the mindset that sometimes we have as brokers, right? We were taught one thing when we got into the business, right? Which is, it takes just as long to do a nail salon as it does to do a grocery store, was what I was taught, right? And so it's just interesting because we're expecting people that have been doing this for, 30, 20, 10 years to all of a sudden shift and make the transition. To me, our conversations for us on our team, and as we talk to associates, it's easier to get the 3, 5, 10-year person to make the shift, right? That hasn't gotten used to the big fees. So, Jamie, the time has come for your question.
Okay, I have 2 questions. Joe, what was your favorite day in Italy?
Every day. I would say that my favorite day was when we surprised my sister at the Cantonetta Antinori. It's only been around for 26 generations. So they make Celaya and Tignanello and whatnot. And my younger sister flew in from LA. My wife and I, Shannon, flew in from, we were in Florida. And my sister repeatedly said, you have to come on this trip. You must come on this trip. And we were like, nah, too busy. And we were just sitting there, and she walked in and she lost her mind. That was just awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the next question is, what's keeping you up at night?
I sleep really well. Yeah.
Well, then I'll do the opposite. What excites you about getting up in the morning?
Maybe that's a better question. Yeah.
I love building things. I just like our team, the team that we're building at Instant and Incendium is extraordinary. We want to cram so much into a short amount of time right now, knowing that we can go from here to there business wise. I just think, it's funny because, Tim Rodber in about May of 2020, I referenced this, we were having our conversation and, in his way basically said, mate, I'm almost really sorry that I brought you over here. You had this big job at Walgreens and whatnot. And I looked at him, I said, Tim, you don't understand. I mean, our company is built for this time. People need us. We have this role, and it's not just sort of humdrum. And we have, it's this idea that leaders make the future, and we feel like we're in a leadership role and we can help forge the future of what that looks like. And so that to me is really, really exciting. The consumerization of work. And I think I mentioned this, Gio, when we were in New York, that the idea that work is moved from a noun to a verb, right? It used to be a place we went to.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a thing we do irrespective of place. I just find that really, really exciting. I do think there's some, really cool technology out there. My son is working in Web3 right now. And the things that he's seeing and learning around, the crypto stuff goes up and down, but, sort of the blockchain activity that's happening, the emergence of a digital ledger technology in real estate, that is massively exciting to me, right? I mean, why do title companies exist? I've been in this industry for over 30 years. I don't think I've ever met anyone that's actually gotten any money back from a title company on a, I don't know, have you guys? Maybe, I don't know. I just haven't. Like, why are you paying? Like, why do we pay title? Anyway, we're uncensored, so I'll say that. But I do think, there's a great opportunity to have smart contracts, which again, reduce friction. So it's like, there's a bit of a theme here, right? Like, how do we consumerize this and make it ultimately make a better life for everyone, right? I mean, it's like, I'm sitting here in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, right? I'm working here for July because I can, and I'm not missing a beat, and I'm getting up early, but who cares? And the sun stays up till 10 o'clock. So, it's definitely improving life, and God knows we need it because there's enough headwinds.
So I want to thank you for taking your time out today, but not just today, but it's been great to see you dive in and get more involved over the last 6 months, right? You and I think had our first call maybe a year and a half ago. And
that's right.
So it's been awesome to see you at these functions and be willing to jump on podcasts like this, because I think the more executive level experienced people like yourselves that we can get to jump in is going to drive others, right? And so, genuinely thank you from the industry, thank you from a personal standpoint even, because it helps us even be able to grow our reach and ability to help drive change.
Well, thank you. I mean, I've learned a ton from both of you, and will continue to do so. And, you're building a really interesting community here with the Uncensored podcast, but just in general at GWA. Juicy was fun as well. There's some interesting characters in this industry. I like it.
Yeah.
And I will see you in Frisco. We'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.